Hello, I'm Darby Alfinger. I'm a special education supervisor for Denton ISD, and I'm going to share some information with you in this section about classroom management. I have had a 30-year career in the area of behavior management and how to support individuals with disabilities of all kinds. I hope I can bring you some value today from what I'm about to share. I want to challenge you to maybe write down 3 things that you could take away and implement right away in your own teaching practices when you start the school year. So welcome to Denton ISD. We're all glad you're here. Why should this matter to you? Well, let me give you some research from some educational groups. They found that 77% of teachers say that they know their teaching would be so much more effective if they did not have to spend as much time dealing with disruptive classroom behaviors. 40% of teachers polled felt that they need to spend more time on keeping order and giving out discipline than they do on actually teaching. And they felt that 50 or more percent of their workday with students is spent dealing with disruptive behavior. So you can see this could really help us in the classroom. So the key to raising student achievement is going to be in your ability to effectively manage student behavior. And I'm going to start you down the path that will show you the way. First, you must understand the concept that no matter how passionate you are about your content area or how sophisticated your curriculum is, or even how great of a delivery you have for that curriculum, you will never get your students' potential unlocked until you get all of your students on the task and engaged. So I'm going to tell you the 2 pillars of classroom management: structure and relationship. So as you see in the slide here, they are the 2 overarching components that if you bring them together, you're going to get that student engagement that's going to make a huge difference for many of your students to be able to reach their potential learning every day. As I share this information with you, I would encourage you to be self-reflective about your own natural tendencies towards either relationship or structure, because we all have them. We lean one way or the other naturally. Challenge yourself and commit to growing in the area that's not as comfortable for you. You can do it. You can learn the skill. We've all known teachers whose classrooms look very chaotic. They're noisy, a million little bodies going everywhere, but somehow they never seem to send students to the office for discipline. Do you know why? It's because they're so strong with relationship that they don't have to lean on structure as much. And then you'll have the opposite. You'll have a teacher who, I'll say it, maybe seems a little bit cold with their students, a little detached, but their classroom is a well-oiled machine. The students know what to expect at every moment of the day. They know the procedures. And again, that teacher often will have very little discipline issues. But here's the thing, is when we rely on one or the other too much and don't develop the other set of skills, we're going to have a student come along. Maybe it's a student with a trauma background. Maybe it's a student that they just won't engage in anything until they know that you care. And that student will have to have that relationship component to respond. Or you'll have a student who maybe has some autism characteristics or high anxiety. They need predictability. And so the only way you're going to really layer in the scaffolding needed is through structure. They'll need that predictability to be able to function in the classroom every day. No matter how hard you try to bond with them or connect with them, they just have to have the structure. So that's what classroom management's all about. It's about finding ways to give access to all students, no matter how their brains are wired. I'm going to give you some examples of structure and examples of relationship building next. I do want to introduce you right now to the concept of UDL, which is Universal Design for Learning. This picture explains the concept well. Giving the same is not fair. Giving behavioral and academic scaffolding is better. The best is removing the fence or the learning obstacle for everyone. Some students will just find it helpful For some students, it will be the only way that you'll be able to engage them. If you want more information on Universal Design for Learning, let your administrator know, or contact Laura Davis or myself, and we will help you get more information or training. So let's talk about some classroom structures. My first piece of advice is to structure every single part of the day. Every part of the day that the student is engaging with. Start with how they walk in the school building or even how they get on and off the bus. How will they walk into your classroom? Think about it. Have a plan. How are they going to put their items away? How are they going to go to the bathroom? Transition to other locations throughout the day? How are they going to greet a visitor that walks into your classroom? Will there be an ambassador, one student designated to do that chore once a week, once a month, so that the rest of the learning won't be disrupted? How are they going to handle it when a friend is upset in the classroom? That's something you can plan for, prepare for, model for, and have a structure for. How are they going to leave your classroom every day? How are they going to handle materials? How are they going to leave the school building? If you want some more resources on ways to think about all of the parts of the day that you could structure, just let us know. We'll be glad to share more detailed ones with you. Part of structure is how to structure the environment with reinforcers. How are you going to positively reinforce the behaviors that you want to see in your students? It's human nature to only engage in an activity that reinforces us. Whether you're 50 or 20 or 4, we only do what works for us. So you have to be purposeful to know how to reinforce the behavior you want, how your students' brains work, and what will work for them. A positive reinforcement system is something that we can train you on more specifically if that's an area that you feel like you need a little extra support in. Also, think about how you're going to teach your classroom routines and behavioral expectations to your students directly. Many students do not have brain patterns that automatically pick up on social norms. The good news is that you can teach behavioral skills just like you teach reading or math. The brain can't tell the difference. Learning is learning. The brain will process that learning in the same way. We use the same strategies for behavioral learning as we do for academic learning. It's good news because you already have some skills. There's lots of places you can research and decide what classroom routines you should pick. There's a lot of content on the internet. You will have a lot of resources from experts in our district as well. What I really want to talk to you is about how to make your classroom structures accessible and how to give every student in your class the best chance of success within your classroom structures. Think of it like this. You may not need a wheelchair ramp to get into a building, but when your hands are full or you've twisted your ankle the day before, it's very useful to use the wheelchair ramp. But if you're in a wheelchair all the time, then your access to that building could be limited without that ramp. Think of the structures in your classrooms as ramps to learning. There are some students who don't really need the ramp, but it's convenient and helpful for them at times. But there are students who absolutely will not get to the next floor of learning if they don't have access to that ramp. How are you going to provide those ramps? Think of your learners and their individual brains. Some of them will need visual reminders placed at key locations. Some will need frequent breaks to rest their brains and reset, especially if they have attention or hyperactivity challenges. Some will need tactile experiences such as role play or peer modeling before they'll be able to make the structure and routines into habits. How habits of routines are established in the brain is another great area of research. My team is going to be reading Automatic Habits by James Clear this year in our book study. It does a great job explaining how and why we should create systems in our world that support healthy habits, and it applies to our classroom habits as well. Relationship building is the second pillar of building a strong classroom management system. As I stated earlier, there will be students who come to you that only respond to their engagement in learning if they trust you. And trust adults may be something that they do not want to risk to do very much anymore in their young lives. Please keep in mind that it's just like when we teach academics. We have to meet the student where they are, and then we have to build the next step in learning. The same is true for behavioral needs. We respond by figuring out how to intervene just like we do as if they were not getting an academic concept. Research has long established that classroom management is the key to getting students maximum learning benefit. Marzano's research from 2003, it's been a little while, but it's still very valid. It shows that establishing positive relationships with students can reduce disruptive behavior by 50%, and that a positive relationship with students reduces disruptive behavior at all grades levels. So it doesn't matter if you're working with 3-year-olds or a 12th grader. If you have a bond and a trust, and that student knows that you're there for them in their best interest, and you care about them as an individual, you're going to, by research, automatically raise their chances of learning by 50%. So we've already established that student engagement is very key in learning. One way to really engage your students in the content and build relationships at the same time is to incorporate their interest into the lesson. To do this, you need to start with some kind of interest inventory with each student. You can make time with each individual student at the beginning of the year, or even do a phone call with them before school starts. You can find out through an interest inventory the first few days of school. You're going to be putting money in the bank of that student that you can spend later when you're having a hard day with them, if you include something that they love in their school day. It's going to be very meaningful to them. We know so much more in the last 10 years about how brains actually work, that their physical structure changes as the result of trauma or ADHD, depression, or other types of life experiences. It makes sense, right? When a person who's elderly goes through a physical brain change through Alzheimer's or something sad like that, we know that the physical structure of their brain changes, therefore their behavior changes. It's the same thing with trauma and other situations in life. It can physically change the brain. And so you get a different behavioral outcome from that child. So the way that we mitigate those responses is to teach the brain a new way to respond. We have to set up new pathways in the brain that become automatic over time. So remember, learning is learning. Your brain doesn't know if you're learning the multiplication facts or if you're learning how to respond appropriately to a teacher request. And here's another thing that's important for you as a classroom teacher. Behavior in schools is a big deal. There's been lots of litigation on it. It's a hot topic. There are lots of laws that pertain to student behavior management. So be sure and know your legal responsibilities for general education students, 504 students, and children under special education protections. It'll really help you if you'll preload that information and know how to implement the law when it comes to supporting behavioral needs with students. Just remember that the surface behavior that you might see from a student in your classroom, it's just that, it's just the surface. We have to dive a little deeper, figure out what's going on with that student before we know how to respond. It's the same thing as you do with academic intervention. When a student can't go to the next step of learning, we figure out what specific intervention we should provide academically. That's what we do. This is the point that we go in and we say, hey, what's going on with this student's brain? What do we know about this student? And we do the best we can to figure out what the function of the way they're behaving is for them. And then we try to teach something new, just like you do when a student learns something that wasn't correct in the next step of a math problem. You go back and you reteach. Same with behavior. Learning is learning. You will have students that are going to struggle with maladaptive behavior in your classroom. I guarantee it. But you can be prepared. You can look at it as an opportunity to really teach and impact their lives in a huge way, just like you do when you teach them to read and write. A child's brain is very much more reactive based, much more than our adult brain should be. And I do a training on why that is, so I'm happy to share that with anybody who's interested. But students, they need to be told how to reset, how to have a fresh start the next day or the next moment. Once they're calm, they need to be taught that. They need to restore their relationships with you as their teacher, with their peers, or anyone else that maybe some trust was broken with because of their behavior. But you got to show them how to do it. Many of them just won't know, and they won't have it modeled at home. Apologies that are appropriate. Being purposeful in how you rebuild relationships. That's part of being human. And it is a great gift to teach a child how to do this. So if you have an interest in getting training on any specific topic I've talked about in this training, our behavior coaching team in special education can come to your campus and provide training to your team or to you, if you have paraprofessionals. We can make that happen. All you have to do is ask your administrator to make the request to our department, and we'll do it. I've added here some resources for you to consider, trainings on the left, and then some books that I think are above average as far as classroom management goes. No More Meltdowns has great strategies that you can intervene with quickly, easily, easy to learn. And of course, restorative discipline practices. Restorative practices is a movement in Texas and across the nation, and the district has had some training in that area, but our behavior coaches have all had training and know how to train in those areas. So this is a book that I would recommend you read if you're interested in that. It's short, it's quick. And then also Safe and Civil Schools. Safe and Civil Schools is the go-to group to find out how to appropriately intervene with maladaptive behavior in schools. The book I have here, we have copies of. I can loan some out if you really want to see it. It's a big book and it can be a little bit intimidating, but it covers every kind of behavior you can imagine and how to intervene with those behaviors, just like you would have a book on how to intervene with an academic issue that was going on. So there you go. Here's resources for you to consider. So here's some last ideas for you to consider. What is your personal philosophy on discipline versus punishment? I want you to think about it, and I want you to think about what some takeaways you could implement right away in your classroom to start your school year off in a great way. So thank you for choosing to decide to make a lasting effect on our world by being a teacher, because you will. And you'll have ripple effects that were started by you on how you affect these little lives the rest of their lives, and then how they go out into the world and affect others. So thank you, and I hope you have a great school year. Just let us know if we can support you in any way.